All right, buckle up for this one. You sent in a whole bunch of articles on the 2024 Heisman Trophy race. And honestly, the big question, did anyone really think Ashton Jeanty had a chance?
A running back from a group of five school winning the Heisman? It'd be historic.
Right. But the more we dug into these articles, the more fascinating this whole thing gets. Boise State had a crazy good season, made it to the college football playoffs for the very first time in school history.
A Cinderella story for sure.
And Jeanty was leading the charge, putting up some truly eye-popping numbers. It was the closest Heisman race we've seen since 2009.
Before we jump into those final results, though, maybe a quick reminder of how this whole voting thing even works, for anyone who needs a refresher.
Yeah, good call. Who exactly decides who wins this thing?
Well, it's not just one person deciding. There's a huge panel, actually 870 media members from all across the country, and then you've got 58 former Heisman winners themselves. Oh, and there's also a single fan vote.
So basically, to win this thing, you have to impress a lot of people.
Yeah, you could say that. And when you look at the final numbers, it's crazy how tight this race really was. Travis Hunter, the quarterback from Colorado, ended up winning with 2,231 points.
But right there behind him was Ashton Jeanty with 2,017, only 214 points between them.
An insanely small margin, especially when you compare it to the rest of the pack. Dylan Gabriel came in third with 516 points, and then Cam Ward in fourth with only 229 points.
It was a two-man race all the way. But let's break down Jeanty's season for a second. The guy almost broke Barry Sanders' single-season rushing record. He finished the season with 2,497 rushing yards.
And just to add to that, that's also a Mountain West Conference record.
Yeah.
So for those not super familiar with college football, the Mountain West is considered a group of five conference, not one of the big powerhouse conferences. So for Jeanty to put up these numbers, in a conference that doesn't usually produce Heisman contenders, it's pretty remarkable.
And the touchdowns, too. 29 rushing TDs, tied for the most we've seen since 2013.
Speaking of unstoppable, you actually marked an article about Jeanty's performance in the Mountain West Championship game, specifically that 75-yard touchdown run. Think you want to talk about that one?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It was insane.
This is where things get interesting. He rushed for over 100 yards in every single game this season. Not only that, he had 17 games with over 100 rushing yards in a single half.
Hold on, 100-plus rushing yards in a single half 17 times. Now that's consistency. Talk about a workhorse. No wonder people started comparing him to Barry Sanders.
And get this, nobody since 2000 has had 13 straight games with 125 or more rushing yards.
Yeah.
Jeanty was a beast.
I remember reading about Omarion Hampton. He was the nation's second leading rusher, and then I saw Jeanty's yards after contact stat, 1,889 yards. That's more than Hampton's total rushing yards for the entire season.
That number right there, 1,889 yards after contact, tells you everything you need to know. This wasn't just some speedy guy. Jeanty was powerful, determined. He's got that old school workhorse mentality. I can totally see why voters were impressed.
He was making plays out of nothing, turning every single run into a highlight reel. Almost like he was playing a different sport than everyone else.
It kind of felt that way, right?
Yeah.
Like he was on a whole other level.
Yeah.
He also had 10 runs of 60-plus yards and 8 touchdowns of 60-plus yards. No other FBS team even had more than 60-plus yard runs all season.
So he wasn't just grinding out yards. He was breaking off these huge, explosive plays. Okay, let's play what if for a second. Imagine if Jeanty actually won the Heisman.
It would have been massive for Boise State and the Mountain West Conference. Put them on the map in a whole new way.
The first Heisman winner from both. You actually flagged an article about the historical context of the Heisman. Was there anything in there about non-Power 5 players winning?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Jeanty would have been the first player from a non-power conference to win in this entire century. It's been a long time coming. And it really makes you think about what these smaller programs mean in college football today. It's wild to think how close he actually came, despite everything kind of stacked against him.
I know, right? It really makes you question that whole idea that you have to play for one of those powerhouse schools to even have a shot at the Heisman.
Exactly. It reminds me of those legendary Heisman campaigns we've seen from guys at smaller schools. Doug Flutie at Boston College, Carson Wentz at North Dakota State.
Total underdog stories. But they were both quarterbacks. Jeanty, being a running back, makes his performance even more unique, especially in this era where it seems like quarterbacks win the Heisman every year. You even sent over a few articles debating if running backs even mattered anymore in college football these days.
And Jeanty just blew that argument out of the water.
Seriously. It makes you wonder if we're seeing a shift in how voters view the position.
It's a great question.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't deny his stats. The guy was a one-man wrecking crew for Boise State, 100-plus rushing yards every single game. I mean, come on. That's unheard of these days.
Okay. You've convinced me Jeanty had a monster year. But was he really robbed? Did Hunter deserve to win?
Well, that's the debate. Hunter had insane numbers, too, led Colorado to an undefeated regular season. But you can't deny Jeanty's impact on his team. He wasn't just padding his stats. He was the heart and soul of that Boise State offense. Controlled the clock, wore down defenses, put up points like it was nothing.
And let's not forget those ridiculous yards after contact numbers. This wasn't just speed. He was fighting for every single inch. It's almost a shame he didn't get that rushing record.
Only 132 yards short of Barry Sanders. Can you imagine the pressure he must have been feeling? And he still delivered, week after week.
It's crazy to think he could have actually broken that record in the college football playoffs. Talk about a storybook ending.
Oh man, can you imagine? That would have been insane. But even without the record, Jeanty's season is one for the books. It really raises some interesting questions about the Heisman Trophy going forward.
Like what? Paint the picture for us.
Well, for starters, it really challenges that idea that the Heisman is a quarterback award. It proves that a running back can still be a dominant force and get the attention of voters.
So you're saying we could see more running backs in the Heisman conversation in the next few years?
I definitely wouldn't rule it out. And it opens up the conversation about those guys playing outside the Power 5 conferences. If Jeanty can come this close, it shows that incredible talent can come from anywhere.
That's a big deal. The Heisman race just got a whole lot more exciting and unpredictable.
Exactly. And it's all thanks to Ashton Jeanty shaking things up.
Yeah.
He definitely left his mark on college football this year.
No doubt about it. And it leaves us all wondering, what's next for Jeanty?
If he can keep this momentum going, he could be a major force for years to come. Maybe even another Heisman run. Who knows?
Okay, so we've covered the stats of the historical context, but there's one more big question we got to talk about.
The elephant in the room, you mean?
Exactly. Does Jeanty's performance, even though he didn't win, change how we think about running backs in today's game?
That's the million-dollar question. We're in this era where quarterbacks are king, both for the NFL and for the Heisman. It's been forever since we've seen a running back who's a true difference maker.
Right. The kind of guy who can win championships on his own. But Jeanty's season makes you wonder if things are starting to change.
His performance throws a wrench into that whole running backs don't matter argument. It shows that a truly elite running back can still change the game, even with all the focus on passing these days.
And it makes you think, if he keeps playing like this, could he be a Heisman contender again in 2025? What do you think?
It's definitely possible. He'll be a senior. He's got the talent, and now he's got the whole country watching. Plus, he'll be playing with something to prove.
But what would it actually take for a running back to win the Heisman in this era of quarterbacks?
That's a tough one. They need a historic season, something that completely overshadows even the best quarterbacks in the country.
Maybe break Barry Sanders' record, rush for 3,000 yards, lead his team to an undefeated season and a national title.
Yeah, it would have to be something extraordinary. But after what we saw from Jeanty this year, I wouldn't put anything past him.
Well said. So what's the takeaway for you, the listener? If you're as intrigued by this whole story as we are, I encourage you to keep digging. We've given you the starting point, but there's a ton more to explore Jeanty's journey. The evolution of the running back position, the future of the Heisman. Don't let the deep dive end here.
And who knows, maybe you'll find something we missed. Happy exploring.
So we spent some time on Jeanty's incredible season, how close he came to winning the Heisman, and what it all means for the future of running backs in the game.
But there's like another piece of this puzzle we haven't really talked about.
You mean him coming from Boise State?
Right. A non-Power 5 school.
Yeah. It's easy to get caught up in the numbers, but at the end of the day, we're talking about a guy who defied all expectations at every turn. Remember those articles we were talking about? The ones debating if running backs were even relevant in college football anymore. And then you've got Jeanty almost breaking Barry Sanders' record playing for Boise State.
Makes you wonder, did playing outside the Power 5 actually hurt Jeanty in the Heisman race? That's a good question. It's hard to say for sure. But, playing for a big-name school definitely gives you more exposure, more media attention.
Yeah, like every game is primetime. Everyone knows who you are.
Exactly. And that has to influence voters, even if it's subconscious.
So even though Jeanty had these crazy stats, maybe some voters just didn't know him as well because he wasn't playing in the SEC or the Big Ten.
It's possible. And it brings up a bigger question about how we judge talent in college football. Are we putting too much emphasis on the name, on the jersey, instead of the player wearing it?
That's a great point. And it makes Jeanty's almost win even more impressive, right? He overcame those biases. He forced people to pay attention.
Absolutely. He proved that talent can come from anywhere, no matter what conference you're playing in.
You know, there was an article that compared Jeanty to Doug Flutie, who won the Heisman back in '84, playing for Boston College.
Another example of a non-Power 5 guy defying the odds.
But Flutie was a quarterback. Does that make Jeanty's story even more remarkable?
Maybe. Yeah, we've been talking about it. Quarterbacks have basically dominated the Heisman for the past 2 decades. For a running back to come this close, playing for a school like Boise State, it's pretty unheard of.
Almost like he was playing on hard mode. And he still almost won the whole thing.
Right. And that should inspire young players everywhere. It shows you that if you're good enough, people will notice you no matter where you play.
It's a great message. So to wrap things up for our listeners, what have we learned here?
I think we've learned that we need to rethink some of our assumptions about college football, about talent, about what's possible. Ashton Jeanty's season was a perfect example. Sometimes the best stories come from the most unexpected places.
Well said. And while our deep dive into this topic ends here, we hope it's just the beginning for you. If you're interested in learning more about Jeanty's journey, the evolution of the running back position, the future of the Heisman Trophy, keep exploring.
There's a whole world of information out there. Who knows what you might find. Happy exploring.